Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. It is 2 p.m. on Sunday. I've already done a live chat this morning. I've got the privilege of the self-proclaimed best brain in boxing, my brother, his name is John, who has joined the channel this afternoon. So I've dropped everything, I've rescheduled my plans, I've made myself available, and we're here to discuss some more boxing. Now, before we get into it, yeah, we're doing this in a live chat format. It wasn't planned, so I haven't posted anything. But if you are watching, please do join us live. Please comment in the chat. I'm going to have my phone here, so I'm going to be able to keep up to date with comments in the chat as we're going along. If you've got any questions for me, if you've got any questions for my brother, any fighters you want his opinions on, any fights you want his opinions on, put it out there. We don't actually have a strict format for this. We don't have any topics necessarily in mind. It's more just a, sort of open discussion about boxing and boxing-related matters. So before we get into it, I can see already Sarah's joined in the chat. Hello, Sarah. How are you doing? Thanks for joining. I'll now hand over to my brother, John. For those who don't know, he's been on the channel before, but introduce yourself.
Well, I'm John. I'm Tom's younger brother. I'm the one who actually knows about boxing in our family. And I'm also where the subscribers come from, which is why he's looking at the channel.
You may need to speak quite a bit louder and into the microphone a bit more. You're coming through quite faintly.
Okay, is this any better? Hello, hello.
Yeah, much better.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. Well, I'm the younger brother. I'm the youngest. I must say I had never actually. I'm not the self-proclaimed greatest boxing mind in the country or in the world. I'm the second after Dan Raphael.
He brings not only youth but beauty to the Boxing Gossip channel. Right now, as I say, no strict format. So let me hand it over to you. What fights are you most looking forward to? What fights would you most like to see made in the future? Floor is yours.
Well, everyone looks forward to Floyd's fights, especially if this is his farewell and goodbye. But that's a whole other topic on who it's actually going to be. Somewhat surprisingly, perhaps, the fight I'm actually looking quite forward to is Cleverly from Fara. I think that has potential to be a really quite good fight, and that acts as a real litmus test for the pair of them, which is going to be good.
It's interesting you mention that. I really like that fight. We actually went together to see Cleverly Krasniki. Give me your memories and thoughts of that fight.
I remember being slightly underwhelmed because Cleverly never came out of second gear, which was the thing. He looked fine, but he was very much obviously cruising from pretty much round one onwards. And I know Krasniki was his mandatory, but still, it wasn't an elite performance. But he's obviously a very good boxer. Fara is going to be tough for him. I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. I prefer that to him fighting Bremer. I really do.
I really, really like the fight. Just so you know, Sarah is in the chat. She says she likes your modesty. So you're doing well with my 7% female viewership already, John. But yeah, from Fara Cleverly, I like it. I really like it. For me, Cleverly is a hard fighter to sum up. He got a loss to Kovalev. That's no disgrace. He looked woeful against Tony Bellew, but can we forgive him that, bearing in mind that the weight class is 25 pounds apart? If you remove those two fights, he's actually got a pretty decent-ish record. Fara obviously lost to Stevenson, lost with credit. More recently,
Chavez.
Beat Chavez. So who would you lean to in that fight?
Fara, for me. I think he'll be able to walk. I think he'll be able to walk down Nathan Cleverly. The question is, can Nathan Cleverly do anything about it?
Yeah. Do you see him winning by points or by stoppage?
I could see a stoppage. I'm not saying Fara hits as hard as Kovalev, but he did put Stevenson down.
I actually think, I actually think Cleverly's chin is underrated. I mean, Kovalev is one of the hardest punchers in the sport, but apart from that, he's shown a pretty iron jaw. I mean, he was begging for Bellew to knock him out, but Bellew wasn't able to, even at 200 pounds. I think it's a really entertaining and potentially interesting fight. But I am slightly biased. I acknowledge that because I'm a big Nathan Cleverley fan, certainly. What are your thoughts on one of my other favourite fighters, Billy Joe Saunders versus Andy Lee?
It's going to be an okay fight. You know, it's not going to set the world alight. I think this is probably Billy's best chance for a world title, if we presume that Lemieux and Golovkin will meet at some point. So I think this is probably his best chance. Lee's a fine fighter, fine, but not spectacular, really. So it's going to be fine, it'll be fun, but I'm not mad for it. There are more other middleweight fights I prefer to see.
How do you rate Billy Joe and Andy Lee in the context of the middleweight division? Are they in your top 10?
Andy Lee is. I think he got a lot of credit from the Quillen fight, despite being put down twice. Billy Joe is obviously a talented fighter, and you know, his fight with Eubank Jr. is a credit to him for that. But you know, there is the world champions are very much better than the European level, which is what he's been at recently. Even Andy Lee included are a step above.
Okay. The way I see that fight going, I think Andy Lee typically is a very, very slow starter. You know, we saw him drop several rounds to John Jackson, several rounds to Matt Korobov, several rounds to Peter Quillen. He's a guy who starts very slowly. He can be outboxed early on. Billy Joe Saunders, in my opinion, someone who's a very, very quick starter. We saw him win the early rounds against John Ryder, Chris Eubank Jr., etc. Billy Joe's problem is that he fades late. Now, despite the fact he definitely fades late, Billy Joe retains defensive capability, retains movement, and seems to have a way of hanging in there. The question is, and for me it's the only factor in this fight, will Billy Joe Saunders hang in there, or will Andy Lee find a punch to knock him out? Because I believe Billy Joe will be a long way up as we get to round 7 and 8.
Agreed, definitely.
And how do you think that question will be answered by Andy Lee?
I don't know, Andy Lee's got very hard hands, it seems, and I don't think Billy Joe has been clocked by anything like that. But
not even by the almighty power of Chris Eubank Jr.?
Not even.
I heard he hits harder than Ernie Savers, Chris Eubank Jr. That welterweight he hit in one of his early fights, you know, the light welterweight he caught with that 20-punch combination. He almost knocked him over with that power.
Oh, Tom, where has this come from? Put the claws back in.
Where is Chris Eubank Jr.?
Holiday, probably. Centre Parks.
Who do you want to see him fight? And I'm assuming we're talking middleweights here, as opposed to sort of lightweights, light welterweights, super feathers.
At the level he's at, I really wouldn't mind him fighting anyone, just as long as he starts fighting, because he's actually a good fighter. But I don't know where he's gone. I don't know if he's stropping, or if he's busy defending his world championship of the interim, wherever the interim is. Maybe that's where he's gone. But I don't know. It's a bit strange. Really, if it's a case of he couldn't get Billy Joe again, so he's thrown his toys out of the pram, then there's not much you can do, really.
I'm just looking in the chat. If you are watching, it says to me that there's 5 people watching live. So if you are watching, say hello. Sarah says, I'd say Andy Lee is the more dangerous of the two, but he can see Billy Joe Saunders out slicking Andy Lee. Respond to Sarah, John. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say to Sarah, hello by the way, you're right in the case of he could outslick him. That much I'm pretty certain of. I don't know if Andy Lee's the more dangerous because he carries the more knockout, the knockout power. But I think that is where the fight might be ended. If the fight is going to end at all, it'll be with Andy Lee, I think. But if he can or not is the bigger question for me. If he's outslicked, then I think he's going to be outslicked comprehensively.
Mr. Cutsy has joined in, like the name. He's gone, Eubank Jr. is probably hanging around car parks fighting chavs. You may recollect the famous video of Eubank on YouTube in a fight in a car park against a few hoodies. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
You must check that out after we finish this. 791, Mike, says that my brother is a funny dude. Tell me why. Is it his facial appearance? Is it the nonsensical opinions? Or is it just his comedic genius, Mike?
Over 20 years I've had this. It's been a very long 20 plus years.
Mike, your feedback is required. Let us know why he's a funny dude. Is it a good thing? Is it not? Anyway, let's move on. The next question. Who ate all the pies? Was it David Hay or was it Kell Brook? Did you see them last night?
No.
You missed it?
I was out last night, I'm afraid.
Oh, and you've just watched the fights, you haven't watched the coverage. Kell Brook looked huge.
Really?
He looked like an old Prince Nassim Hamed. He looked like he was, I guess he was walking around at light heavyweight. I mean, the chins were literally rolling down his body. It's very, very clear that he's not fighting Brandon Rios anytime soon. I think we can agree with that. Who would you like to see Kell step in with?
Honestly, I was actually quite looking forward to a Brandon Rios fight. I suppose now that if that's scuppered, then they'll start angling for Furman or Marquez.
I don't think the Furman. How do you think Furman looked against Collazo?
Not great at all. I mean, even taking the 5th round aside, when Collazo landed that magnificent left hook to the body. In terms of performance, I think Amir Khan's was a lot better against Luis Collazo. Whirlwind punching.
Sammy Joe has joined in the chat. He says Eubank Jr. is in his room, clutching his interim belt like it's the ring out of Lord of the Rings. And his dad is watching him. Sam, the Warriors fan, says Billy Joe's conditioning is terrible. I'm going with my fellow Irishman. Respond to Sam on that one, John.
What, Billy Joe's conditioning?
Yeah.
It was worrying how he faded against Eubank, especially considering how fantastic he looked in the first half. As you say, Lee is a late starter, and without trying to be rude and say, but he relies on his big punches now, and that's it. He does have very big punches that have been very effective in recent fights, so it is something to look out for. But even if he scores a knockdown or two, the question is, will Billy Joe have built up such a lead? Which is possible.
Mike says that he likes your dry wit, and he wants to know if you think Frampton's defensive holes got exposed last night.
Frampton's defensive holes, good question. The first knockdown, I wouldn't say so. I think fundamentally he got clipped in much the same way that Kovalev got clipped against. Was it Blake Caparello? I know Caparello stepped on his foot, but still, he just got caught with a jab and just, his knee buckled. Those things happened. The second punch, I don't know. If memory serves me correct now, he ducked down and he seemed to be swaying from side to side and he got clipped on the ear, which is a remarkably horrible experience. So I don't know if you could say it was a offensive hole. It's not great. It certainly doesn't look very good. But I think it would be unfair to then detract that away from what was a very, very good performance from round 2 through 12.
No, I completely disagree with you there. I don't think it was a very good performance at all from rounds 2 through to 12. In fact, I think it was an appalling performance from rounds 2 through to 12.
What, the way he came back from it? 10-7 in the first round?
Pardon?
The way he went 10-7 in the first round and then, maybe after the third.
Multiple points deducted. Let me just get in on this one quickly. Carl did what Carl does best. We know he's a good boxer. We know he's got combination punching. We know he's well-rounded. He did some good stuff, some very attractive, visually pleasing stuff. But let me say this. Apart from getting hit twice in the first round, he also got heavily rocked in the third round. Even towards the end of the fight, when he was very much getting the better of it, this opponent, who, out of interest, is the 11th ranked super bantamweight in Mexico on BoxRec, he's not even in the top 10 of his own country, let alone the world, was landing on Frampton with regularity. He looked like a hard puncher who could hurt Frampton, and he was clipping Frampton again and again and again. And I do think that the defensive gaps were in effect. I must admit, prior to last night, Carl Frampton is someone I was exceptionally high on. now I see him versus Quigg as a real competitive fight. How do you see that one going?
I'd still side with Frampton, in truth. Quigg looked good against Martinez, don't get me wrong. Second round knockout is a very good thing. But I think resume, I would go for Frampton, in truth.
Yeah, I mean, Quigg, I think he was in against a much smaller opponent who was a bit shot-worn. And to be fair, he won the first 4 or 5 minutes of the fight and then just got clipped, really.
The things I find worrying was when he said he struggled to make the weight. And, maybe that's the case, but there are so many fights. Frampton's been going on and on about how he could fight Santa Cruz and Quigg and Guillermo Rigondeaux, etc. But now he's already saying, I'm struggling to make the weight, You can't have your cake and eat it. He is either a super bantamweight and feels like he's the best in the world, or he's no longer a super bantamweight and needs to move up.
Sam says, everything about Frampton got exposed last night. Mike says, what did you make about his complaints about the soft canvas and the weight issues? Mike, the weight issues for me are, maybe he hasn't made the weight in the best way. Maybe he's overlooked Gonzalez and not done a proper camp. I think that's very possible. The way I look at it, Frampton is much smaller at the weight than Scott Quigg. I actually think he looked a lot smaller last night than his opponent. So I don't think he's necessarily big at the weight. I don't think he's crying out for a move to featherweight. I just think he maybe overlooked Gonzalez. What do you think on that, John? I
agree, broadly. I thought the soft canvas thing was really interesting. I've never heard that one before. But I'm not sold on the weight issue. Really, I suspect his next fight will either be slightly up against Leo Santa Cruz or Abner Mares, or still defending his title, or looking for a quick fight, basically.
Sammy says he doesn't think Frampton got exposed. He came back well, and he showed why he's one of the best. Sammy, fair point. What I would say is he came back well against a fighter of Gonzalez's quality. Will he be able to come back well against a fighter of higher quality? Sam says Gonzalez was ranked 55 in the world going into the fight. He was just there to get knocked over. And Joe says good evening from Japan. It's 10:30 in the evening over there. So we've got a real global following on the channel now.
You see what I can bring.
Which makes it interesting. So just give me your quick thoughts on Sam's comment there. Gonzalez was ranked 55 in the world. He was there to get knocked over.
It's not encouraging. It's certainly not encouraging. But, people start at rank 55 in the world and they finish at rank number 1 in the world. I'm not saying that Gonzalez will. I'm saying he was just, he was plucked to lose pretty much, or plucked to make Frampton look good. And I suppose in a roundabout way he sort of did that. But
Mike said Frampton would look tiny at feather. Yeah, I agree, Mike. Walsh has said Frampton's resume is deep enough that one subpar performance didn't expose him. Mike says, what would Rigo do with Frampton's flaws? John, your thoughts on what would Rigo do?
You and I have disagreed on this before about what would Rigo do against Frampton. I think Guillermo Rigondeaux is a master fighter. And I think he'd win. I think he wins a lot. The only fight he might not win in that roundabout weight class for me is his fight against Lomachenko, which is coming up, which I am over the moon about. I should have had that on my list when we started earlier. But I think Rigo beats. I think El Chacal beats the Jackal, definitely.
I'm going to say this slightly tongue-in-cheek, but what about Rigo's glass jaw?
Doesn't have one.
He gets dropped. He gets robbed.
So does Carl Frampton.
Pardon?
So does Carl Frampton.
Indeed. But doesn't that mean he can be quite beatable?
Well, no. I mean, yes, he got dropped a couple of times, but I can't remember the name of his last opponent. But his face afterwards was just a mess. Everything looked broken. Let's not pretend that Rigondeaux is a defensive master who's chinny and can't punch. He is none of those things apart from defensive master.
Joe says that Carl Frampton doesn't have enough reach for featherweight. Yeah, I widely agree with this, to be honest.
Leo Santa Cruz is really big as well, which is the other thing. I remember him looking huge.
He's a big guy for the weight, yeah, very much so. So look, as I say, this is an unscripted show. We've got about 10 people joining us live now. We're not here to discuss any particular topic, so we're happy to have a bit of back and forth. If there's any topics you want to hear us discuss, any questions you want us to answer, please do get involved. Please say hello, leave your comments in the chat, and we'll have a bit of back and forth on them. Let's talk about some of the other things going on the UK scene at present. Frank Buglioni versus Fedor Chutinov looks like being rescheduled for the super middleweight world title. What do you make of that fight?
I don't know. I think I'm surprised that Buglioni is in a world title fight, if it is a world title, but that's another argument for another day, against Fedor Chutinov. I did read somewhere that they were surprised that Chutinov's nose got broken because a lot of headguards now come with a nose bar, pretty much to prevent that exact sort of thing from happening, which is true. But it's an okay fight, but it's not going to set the super middleweight division alight, is it?
I think they're a top 10 super middleweights. I mean, Buglioni isn't even top 6 or 7 in the division in the UK, is he? You'd have him behind Frotz, De Gale, Grove, Smith,
Fielding,
yeah. Murray, exactly.
I could see whoever wins out of that fight going in immediately against Arthur Abraham now that he knocked out Stieglitz last night.
Abraham's fighting Sturm.
Confirmed?
No.
But didn't Felix Sturm lose to Chutinov? But he lost to Chutinov.
Yeah, I know, but it's a big fight in Germany. Sturm is a real big following over there.
I don't say anyone's fighting anyone till they're confirmed. It's confirmed. I don't think that. I understand it's a big fight. I've known about that, but he lost. Maybe he'll fight the winner, but I don't see him fighting Abraham immediately.
Oh, I completely disagree. Abraham doesn't exactly seek out the biggest fights, does he? He's just fought Paul Smith twice and Robert Stieglitz 4 times. A nice payday against an aging Felix Sturm would be right along the Alpha Abraham MO at present. So looking at the comments, Mike says the Japanese fighter Rigo fought was 6 foot. Roz says Rigo picks apart everyone in the division. Sam says, how ironic will it be if Frampton and McGuigan have to resort to begging Hearn for a Lee Selby fight? I would honestly favour Amagasa in a fight with Frampton. Bruce says Amagasa, the guy Rigo fought, had 7 inches height advantage, and Sam says and about 25 pounds. Mike, interested to hear both your thoughts on Mitchell Smith. I think he has real potential. And Bruce Wayne, Chutinov apparently has already signed a contract to fight 19-year-old Vincent Fagenboots. Yeah, Fagenboots is this Sauerland prospect, isn't he? He's like knocking everyone out. Apparently he's going to be a real big player.
Yeah, I think I've seen his name featured on Sky Sports a couple of times, talking about him and his sort of rise.
He fought on the Bellew Cleverly undercard, and obviously Sky are working with Sauerland. He could be quite an interesting one to follow. Let's talk about Mitchell Smith. We've both seen Mitchell Smith box live. We've been at his fights previously. I think we've seen him fight live twice.
Was that what? So H. Chisora and Cleverly Krasnicki?
Yeah, I'm not sure he fought on the H. Chisora undercard. We certainly saw him fight Cleverly Krasnicki. Yeah, I like Mitchell Smith. I really like Mitchell Smith. I do think he needs to try and get down to lower weight classes because I think his power could be more effective. But I think he's a real good technician and a likeable guy and a likeable fighter. I'd like to see him do well. His performances, in my opinion, have been somewhat inconsistent. Sometimes he fights and, I think that he's got the potential to be a world champion. Sometimes he looks like he's found his level and he's laboured to a few victories. But if he can cut the weight, if he can, take it fully seriously, I think that Mitchell Smith is a one to watch. What about yourself?
I broadly agree, pretty much. I think I vaguely remember seeing him fight, and I remember being quite impressed at the time. But it seems to be a vague story in British boxing now. Certainly, I've seen it a couple of times where someone just isn't in the right weight class. They might be able to get a title struck down to their promoter, but they need to go down. Basically, Frankie Gavin was also the same when he fought Kell. There seems to be somewhat of a story here.
How bad? I'm going to completely mix it up here. Change topics. How bad is Deontay Wilder?
I don't know, the difference between the chap who fought Stiverne and the chap who fought Molina was quite stark to me. So I thought the one who fought Stiverne was a really mature fighter that showed quite a few different assets to his game, as well as murderous punching power. When the chap fought Molina, I was sort of sitting there going, Povetkin's going to destroy this chap. He's not even going to see the 12th round. So I don't know, but I was really shocked at the difference between Stiverne, which was his best performance, and Molina, which was not a good performance.
I know you're a technical wizard. Tell me what Wilder does wrong technically.
Well, he's corrected a few of the things. I remember when he fought Audley, and he was just winging in punches like pure haymakers from almost down by his knees. And this seemed to be corrected against Stiverne. He had quite a sharp jab going. I suppose he hurt his hand, which is the obvious thing. But he fought well, and he fought like a tall man, how a tall man should. You know, with big punches, but from range, controlling the distance against a shorter opponent. Then against Molina, it just wasn't there. I mean, he wasn't throwing the right hand with the same intent. Molina caught him with that left hand in the 3rd round, I think. I mean, I've read somewhere that people seem to think that he was carrying Molina, but you shouldn't need to carry Eric Molina. I mean, it's just...
They say this about Gennady Golovkin as well, don't they? Like, oh, if Golovkin let William Monroe Jr. win a round, because Golovkin was trying to make the fight competitive, and Wilder carried Molina.
Yeah, but there's the difference between Golovkin doing it and Deontay doing it is Golovkin wasn't hurt when he did it. Like, Deontay's legs locked when Molina caught him with that punch. Monroe hit him and Golovkin just kept going. Anyone who watches Tom's video should know
The problem with Wilder are those wild, awful winging hooks. I agree, Walt. It's his poor punching technique. It's his ridiculous stance, which is so wide it means he gives up his height and can't move. It's his complete lack of discipline. I've seen improvements in Wilder. He boxed well against Stiverne. I was amazed when he scored a knockdown with his left hand against Molina. I've seen improvements, but he's not there. He's not there yet. And I think the top boys at the weight beat him. John, who in the heavyweight division do you pick over Deontay Wilder right now?
Vladimir and probably Povetkin.
Is that it?
I wouldn't put Tyson Fury.
You pick Wilder to beat Tyson Fury?
I'd say they're probably about as good as each other.
Who would you pick in that fight?
I don't know.
Gun to your head, you pick one.
I can't. People have put Fury down with much less punching power than Deontay Wilder. Fury might be able to mix it up and fight better than anyone who's Deontay Wilder has fought.
Mike, Tyson Fury would expose Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder doesn't have any inside game, and Fury would be on the move rather than standing in front of those awful wild hooks. Wars says a guy who is 6'7" with that reach should never fight like that. He's referring to Deontay Wilder. You're both completely correct. Completely correct.
They are absolutely correct. I'd say Fury is the better technician. But Fury has been put down by weaker punchers. This is a sport where someone gets punched in the face. Maybe it's a puncher's chance, but Deontay's puncher's chance is really, really good.
Hang on a sec. You said you couldn't pick out of the two of them. If Deontay Wilder's only got a puncher's chance, surely
he's got a puncher's chance for someone that's won every fight by knockout, bar one.
What about Eddie Chambers versus Deontay Wilder?
Deontay?
Oh, I think Eddie Chambers schools him.
No.
Why?
Oh, it's been a long time since I saw Eddie Chambers fight, so maybe he's improved drastically, but I've just never been impressed by Eddie Chambers. Pretty much ever.
What about Brian Jennings?
Tough fight. Don't know. Maybe Jennings, actually. Maybe. He might be able to weave his way in.
What about possibly the greatest fighter of all time, Anthony Joshua, versus Deontay Wilder?
Oh, you can just feel the comment section getting angry, can't you? There's no point even beginning to discuss that. Anthony Joshua's nowhere near. How? I mean, don't get me started on the second-ranked WBC, so I'll just go for hours. So,
Give us your thoughts on that, Joshua being ranked second. Go on.
I just, come on. Come on. I mean, I could have sworn there's a WBC youth belt you have to win before you can even start doing that sort of thing. I'm fairly sure Huey Fury owns it, or has owned it. Why? Just what's the point? He's not Guillermo Rigondeaux, he's not a two-time Olympic champion. He's a fine fighter for what we've seen so far. But, come on. He's not even British champion, Commonwealth champion.
So if Wilder fought Anthony Joshua now, possibly two of the most overhyped fighters on the planet at present, who would you pick to win?
Oh, I'm not going to consider that. There's just no point. It's so stupid.
This is what we do on this channel. We do fancy matches.
But what's the point in comparing someone who hasn't even hit 15 fights
Well,
at the moment? And what's the point?
Because Deontay Wilder is the WBC World Heavyweight Champion, and he looks very, very poor. Anthony Joshua is the WBC number 2. A chance is going to come for Anthony Joshua to fight for that belt very, very soon. And Eddie Hearn may decide to take that chance, bearing in mind how poor Deontay Wilder's looked. So
Eddie Hearn won't take that chance until he's made AJ as marketable as he can do over here, which involves beating more fighters over here.
Not necessarily. Maybe he thinks that he could destroy Deontay Wilder and then come back to the UK and have huge pay-per-view matchups with Fury and Hay and etc.
I'm of the opinion that if a number 2 ranking is so ludicrous that I just can't even begin to consider a world title fight when he hasn't even fought the best opponent of his career yet in Dillian Whyte.
Sam the Warriors fan. He thinks Wilder's the best heavyweight in the world when he keeps his damn hands up and uses his jab. His hand speed and power are ridiculous. Sam, I disagree. He's knocked out a load of nobodies. Then he stepped up in class to fight a genuine top 10 heavyweight. Suddenly the power's eluded him and it's gone points. As for the speed, he's a bit of an athlete. He's not got speed like Joseph Parker has. Walsh agrees. He says, how can you say that, Sam? Here's a good one. This is from Mike, John. Do you think Anthony Joshua's true persona, and he's put in brackets street persona, will come out in the build-up to the Dillian Whyte fight?
Well, I saw Eddie Hearn talking about this dark side to AJ and things like that. I don't know because I haven't seen this persona. I'm not a great believer in personas, really. This isn't for WWE. You know, I'm not a great believer in this. I think AJ will turn up, he'll fight, and then we'll see just how much he hates him. I think that's as simple as it gets.
Waltz agrees that we should be talking about Joshua versus Wilder. He says Joshua and Wilder have actually fought the same level of opposition outside of Bermain Stavern. Whilst I'm not 100% sure I agree with you there, because Joshua's best wins are Kevin Johnson and Michael Sprott, whereas Deontay Wilder has beaten the likes of Malik Scott, Eric Molina, who are very poor, don't get me wrong, but they're a bit higher. Sam says Wilder's win over Scott was textbook. Sorry, Wilder did beat Malik Scott, and his win over Stavern was textbook. I disagree that the win over Stavern was textbook. I still think he was a bit open, a bit wild, too eager for the finish. Mr. Cutsy wants to know your thoughts on Joshua versus Lucas Brown.
Interesting fight. A fight I actually think is quite likely to happen. If Brown wins the title off the winner of Chigaev and Oquendo, then I think it's quite likely to happen. They can market him as a world champion if they want. I think if he loses, then it's definitely going to happen. I don't know, really. I mean, I saw yesterday, I think it was you saying that Lucas Brown was a gifted bouncer. I thought was a bit harsh. I thought that was a bit harsh myself. But it would be a fun fight. It would be a good fight. I'd definitely be down to watch it. But you know, Brown has still had over 30 fights. AJ hasn't even had half of that yet.
How do you see Brown versus Chigaev going?
I don't really know. In fact, it's sort of a matter of sort of who's the. sort of who's the best not Klitschko, Wilder, Fury, Povetkin fighter out there? Really, I mean, it's a secondary title, and it seems to be competed for entirely by secondary level boxers. So it's kind of difficult to say. It's sort of, even if they win that title, they're still the B-side for quite a lot of heavyweight fights.
Mike, I have a feeling that Dillian Whyte will rattle Joshua's cage a fair bit in the build-up to the Joshua fight. AJ has shown how easy it is that his buttons can be pushed. Your thoughts?
Well, maybe. Dillian Whyte seems to think that he is the one with agreed status here, that AJ was the one talking crap about him. So, if someone starts, I think, it's one of the joys of a sport like boxing. When someone starts talking crap about you, you can deal with it quite succinctly by stepping in the ropes. Now, if AJ's been rattled by what's come back at him, and he did start it, and so be it. If it was a case of Dillian Whyte bragging about what he did in the amateurs, then I can imagine that's quite embarrassing. Either way. So maybe he's shown a bit of emotional vulnerability, or maybe he has shown what he's, once you crack the surface of what it means to be a professional boxer. Maybe he has.
Okay, this is a question that goes out to both you, John, and also anyone who's watching. Give me your top 5 heavyweights in Great Britain, and give me your top 5 heavyweights on the planet.
I'll do the planet first, if you don't mind. I would have Vladimir at number 1, Povetkin at number 2. I suppose based on popular opinion, Tyson at number 3. Deontay at number 4. Can't even think of number 5. Maybe Brian Jennings. Maybe Brian Jennings. In Britain, well, I suppose number 1, Tyson Fury. It's difficult then, because he sort of blazed the trail that no one else has sort of stepped up to. I'm very reluctant to put AJ at number 2. Very reluctant. But Chisora hasn't been fighting recently. I'm not exactly sold on Gary Cornish. I know, you'll have to let me think about that one.
I think for me, top 5 in the world: Klitschko, Fury, Povetkin, possibly Jennings, and then Wilder. Possibly. Although I could maybe throw Kubrat Pulev in there. It's tough. As for Great Britain,
I suppose we're too late. We're 24 hours too late to include David Price in there.
Well, I don't know, actually. I think David Price, David Price, whether you like him or not, he's beaten the Sam Sextons, he's beaten the John McDermotts, the Matt Skeltons, the Audley Harrisons of this world. He is solid at British level. I reckon I go Fury, Chisora, Joshua, Hughie Fury, and no. I'll probably go Fury, Tyson Fury, Chisora, David Price, Anthony Joshua, Hughie Fury. Just having a look in the chat. Walsh says he'd have been more impressed if Wilder had beaten Scott over several rounds, but the first round KO was suspect. Sam, he picked the Stavern who beat Areola to beat Povetkin. Povetkin couldn't knock out Huck and struggled with Eddie Chambers and Chigayev. He just doesn't move his head enough. Walsh, the fact that Eric Molina was the second name mentioned when defending Wilder's resume is the most damning argument against Wilder. Sam says, say what you want about Molina, but he can punch. Walsh says, yeah, but what credible opponent has Molina ever KO'd? Sam said he nearly KO'd Areola. Sam, you're kind of hanging yourself there, I think, a bit, pal.
Molina's a teacher. I seem to remember him saying his profession is as a teacher. I seem to remember him saying.
Well, I still remember when Leo Santa Cruz fought that guy last time out, who was he was a telesales executive.
What, the Floyd undercard?
I think so, yeah. He used to go into work and like make his sort of 50 PPI calls a day, and then in the evening he trained for like half an hour to fight Leo Santa Cruz. This is
We can all dream. I'm actually next to Floyd Mayweather, as it turns out. In between writing my essays, I'm training for Floyd Mayweather.
all well and good. Right, we can't talk for too much longer. My brother has got some homework to do. He's got to go and learn his sums, so he's going to have to crack on sooner rather than later. We wanted to do a
20
live
years.
chat to reintroduce him to the channel. I think we'll have some more structured videos with him where we're not just talking about anything random. We're just talking about one specific topic and going into it in more depth. How do you feel about that?
Sounds great, yeah. I'm sure I can fit you in somewhere, Tom.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, well, thanks very much everyone who's joined us. Thanks for everyone who's watched and commented and said hello. If you says Wilder's last three opponents are a special education teacher, a gardener, and Bermain Stavern, I'm actually not kidding. What a way to end the show. If you've been watching, if you've enjoyed this, please click the thumbs up, give me a like, that helps me out at this end. If you're not already, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much for watching.
Thank you, guys.